The lesson I learned, and I just believed, is you had to embrace your superpower. As an industry, as a journalist, as an individual, what are publications, news organizations good at that no one else on the planet is good at?
What makes for a good media entrepreneur?
I really look for that differentiated superpower in the founder or the founding team and the content. What do you do 10x better than the typical person? Not 2x, not a little bit better.
Are there mistakes that you see media founders make?
And I think people try to do too much. You know, we're in media. We want to scale, reach. That's so important. But on a content standpoint, our growth strategy is really simple. Every year we go even deeper, and then we go a little bit broader. So what even deeper looks like is AI infrastructure. We have 2, maybe soon to be 3 AI newsletters. And I think
Hey, everybody.
Hi.
Jessica, thank you so much for joining us.
I'm so happy to be here. You've got 2 of the 3 information alumni just on the stage ahead. So
yeah, you mentioned
good
that.
Good zone here.
Quick question before I get into my questions. How many folks here are information subscribers? Curious.
Oh, great. Pro, leave your hands up if you're pro. Okay, look at that. Thanks, guys. New features coming.
Double the ARR in terms of the pro subscribers.
Oh, at least, yeah.
Okay, awesome. So I want to start at the beginning, 2013, right? At that time, I remember that time reasonably well. And I think the zeitgeist, at least in terms of media, was still information wants to be free. We're doing venture-backed media companies, BuzzFeed, Vice, Mashable, take your pick. We're going for scale. We're going to compete with Meta. And it wasn't Meta at the time. It was Facebook. And you came out with the information, and it was not that. It was focused. It was industry. It was subscription. What gave you the belief at that time that that was the right model for journalism and the kind of journalism that you wanted to do?
Look, and I think this is actually really, it seems so long ago, JJ, obviously, but it's so important for this moment because we're at another major inflection point. And I think the lesson I learned then, and I just believed, is you had to embrace your superpower. As an industry, as a journalist, as an individual, what are publications, news organizations good at that no one else on the planet is good at? And it's that deep original reporting. And the idea that at the time I was being told to live blog the latest iPhone announcement because it was driving a lot of traffic to the Journal's homepage instead of chasing Phil Schiller down to try and confirm a story at an Apple event, just drove me crazy. And so it was simple, I think, having covered now for 20 years, Silicon Valley is my full-time job, seeing that great companies can be built out of just embracing your superpower and doing it a little bit better every single day. So the idea that news organizations would try to become tech companies to win in a business we were never going to win in, I thought was really dangerous. And that's why I started the information.
It's kind of amazing that you mentioned that. And it makes sense, again, going back to that time, that even the Wall Street Journal, which is, I get the printed paper daily of the Wall Street Journal, and it is a clear subscription business with a very coveted audience that needs that information. Even they were tempted by everything that was in the water at the time, and you were experiencing that even there.
Absolutely. Rupert Murdoch launched an iPad app publication to try and help sell more iPads. It was just in the water, and I think, I've thought a lot about decision-making at big media companies because, again, I think we're doing the same thing again with AI. And I actually think that, the long-term, privately held, family-owned news organizations can tend to be a little less susceptible to some of this, but it's a really big challenge. And you fast forward now, you can't find a new publication that isn't launching with some kind of subscription product, and I think that's very healthy. And so I think there has been this shift towards, tech is amazing and it will transform the news business, but we will transform it by by using that technology to better connect with our readers, deliver information to our readers, not wedge our content into the tech ecosystem.
Yeah. So again, sticking with sort of that, the genesis of the information, what was the opportunity that you saw? What convinced you, not just in terms of the model, but in terms of the audience and the demand and the need that this would work and I can quit the Wall Street Journal and devote the next 15 years of my life and more to this?
So it started with this business model conviction. And then also how technology was being covered. At the time, a lot of the coverage in tech was, is this founder worth X amount of money, right? Tech was what those people in Silicon Valley did. And even inside the journal, I remember I was covering Google, and I heard changes were coming to AdWords, and I wanted to confirm the changes. And I thought, okay, who would know? Okay, who's the biggest spender on AdWords? It's Procter & Gamble. The Journal has a dedicated Procter & Gamble reporter. I'm going to call her up, and I'm going to see if she can help me wrestle this big AdWord change story. And she picked up, and she said, why are you calling me? I'm not a tech reporter. And I realized in that moment, she was a tech reporter. I promise you, the board meetings at P&G were talking about digital marketing for sure, right? That was permeating their strategy. And I thought, wow, there's an opportunity from a coverage standpoint to really serve readers by thinking about the future of business as a technology-driven story. And so I became very passionate about doing tough, fair, not hypey tech coverage, but also taking that broader lens across business.
That makes sense. So also sort of a bet, not just on the model itself, but on the fact that technology would permeate everything and it would grow from maybe in 2013 still a bit of a niche audience to a much broader and sort of, business audience.
Absolutely. I mean, when you start at the Journal, I believe there's a day where you have to learn how to read a balance sheet.
Yeah.
And my analogy was like now it should be vibe coding, but back then that was not a thing. But like the equivalent is like I wanted my reporters to be really, to talk about machine learning, right? To be comfortable in those kinds of issues and asking those kinds of questions. Not that they could do it themselves, but that was sort of your vocabulary, your frame of going into your beat reporting.
So making sure that there's comfort with the subject matter and firsthand experience with the subject matter and a more substantive understanding of what they're covering.
Absolutely, yep.
Yeah. So we talked about what you got right in terms of the model, the bet on technology kind of permeating everything. Was there anything that you've gotten wrong in the last 12 years?
Yeah, I mean, weekly. I don't know if there are any founders in the audience, and hopefully, but the founder journey is really like throwing yourself into the deep end, figuring out what doesn't go well, fixing that, and doing it again and again. For me, the biggest challenges, the biggest lessons, the biggest growth areas are always around my leadership and management and building teams. And when I think back to my first conceptions of an information reporter, it was a reporter like me, right? It was a scoop monger. I could leave the writing. I'd never do the writing. I just wanted to report all day long. I then realized, and this has been really one of the joys of building our now 80-plus person team globally at The Information, is like all the different styles of writers who contribute and do high impact work. So I think the biggest lessons I've learned have really been around how to be a great leader, across all areas of our company. I got things wrong. I was anti-app for a while. I thought people didn't need another news app. That was stupid. The minute we launched an app, our engagement shot through the roof. So there are a lot of tactical things, but the beauty of this is you can fix them, right? There are very few things you can't fix. So,
can you give us a sense of scale? So you mentioned 80 people on the team. The last I saw reported at this point is like 3 years ago. I saw 45,000 subscribers. I don't know if you had Pro at that point. I think maybe you had just introduced it. I assume it's much larger now. I would love to give the audience a sense of scale if we can.
Sure. So we don't reveal, what we say is we have over 800,000 free and paid active subscribers. So Not all of those are paid, but many of them are, well north of that number. And I'm really pleased with our growth. We grew revenue 27% last year, which is sort of where we consistently are in our growth rate. And I've always believed consistent growth with a recurring revenue business is an excellent business. So that's the path we're on.
That's great. The 27%, I feel like that's a metric I was digging for, so I appreciate that.
It's all your scoop.
Yeah, there we go.
I've said it before. Shh, don't talk.
Still making news. In terms of the future of the information's growth, what does that look like? Because I think maybe somebody observing the business might say, there are only so many folks who are going to pay $400 or $900 dollars a year for this kind of news. It seems like that's not the case if you're growing 30% year over year consistently. So I'm curious about what the next few years, the next 5 to 10 years of growth look like kind of at a tactical level.
So I can talk about it in terms of our content and then our business. So on a content standpoint, our growth strategy is really simple. Every year we go even deeper and then we go a little bit broader. So what even deeper looks like is AI infrastructure, right? Like we have 2, maybe soon to be 3 AI newsletters. And I think in addition to, having been the first to most major AI news of significance of the last several years. And the theory behind that is I think people they can say we're niche, we can say, people like to write us off that way, but the universe of people who care about how AI is disrupting business is millions and millions of people globally, right? So I always want us to be ahead. I like having things that people think are too narrow, even sometimes ourselves, like we kind of question, because very quickly technology makes that of very significant. And so we've seen that with AI. Tomorrow in LA, we're hosting our umpteenth creator economy event. When we launched the creator economy newsletter, people really laughed that we were launching a whole newsletter on the creator economy. At the time, I think the Times had 2 influencer reporters in the style section. A few months after we launched our newsletter, they moved them to the business section and it became the next digital business model on the internet. So we're always going deeper. The beauty of where we are now is that we can also be meaningful in areas of coverage that are where tech gives us an edge, but they're even broader. A couple months ago, we hired Ken Brown, a longtime Wall Street Journal money and investing bureau chief, Asia bureau chief, to lead our finance section. So we've been growing out a team of banking, private equity reporters in New York who are breaking a ton of news as it relates to fintech and crypto, but also just getting inside stories about major investors, major financial institutions, tech deals, and so forth. So that's a big area that we've been investing in it for a few more years, but I think especially there's something about this moment and the markets and the timing where we're really seeing it take off. On the business side, individuals paying for the information is still the vast, vast majority of our business. I think it will always remain the majority, but we're seeing strong growth in corporate subscriptions and then also in brand partnerships, which are newsletter sponsorships, advertising, and events. So I'm really excited about all 3 of those.
I also want to talk about your work with other publications. So you've invested in Semaphore, in The Ankler, I believe, probably other publications I'm neglecting to mention right now.
My latest is Racket Magazine for all you tennis fans out there. I've got to promote. It's a print publication, actually, also digital. But
a lot of French Open coverage right now?
A ton. Oh, my God. Anyone watch the Alcaraz match over the weekend? It's amazing. Okay.
Got a couple takers. What makes for a good media investment, a good media entrepreneur? What do you look for in terms of those investments? Because clearly you now have significant experience, running and building the information.
I really look for that differentiated superpower in the founder or the founding team and the content. I always say to a founder who comes to me and wants to start something, what do you do 10x better than the typical person? Not 2x, not a little bit better, but really do you have the superpower? So Caitlin Thompson, the founder of Racket, was a D1 college player, knows the professional aspect of the sport through and through, but also just the culture. she will show up in a room and Billie Jean King will run over towards her, right? That's the entrepreneur that I want to back in tennis. I think, Richard and the Ankler, he, is extraordinary. I met him when he was just sort of fiddling around with his newsletter, convinced him to really charge for it. Seems to be a pattern in that. And now he and Janice are building a great business. And, he has a particular take on the industry, but it's just very uniquely his. And I think there are more and more people doing this. And so I'm very excited to help support and learn from them through Lessin Media, which is my vehicle.
Yeah. Are there mistakes that you see media founders make, common mistakes that drive you mad, or maybe don't, but mistakes?
Yes, and I was just, a company I'm not an investor in, but I'm a big fan of Punchbowl News in DC, and I was spending time with Anna, one of the co-founders, and she goes, you were right, we did raise our price and no one canceled. And so I think, especially recurring revenue, that incremental amount then just makes you a little uncomfortable, not wildly uncomfortable, I think can really pay dividends. That's your oxygen for everything you want to do going forward. So I see that. And then I think people try to do too much. We're in media, we want to scale, reach, that's so important. But, I always think you earn the right to fight the next round, right? You win at something, then you get that next idea, and then you go crush that. And some of that is antithetical to how media people think, and so it can be hard to retrain.
So focus and charge more, essentially. Yeah.
That's all you need.
Cool. I'm going to invest in media companies too. It's going to be great. I think the backdrop of a lot of the conversations today is the hostility of, at least in recent years, the tech industry towards media, and you are very much at the center of that. And I think more recently, the administration, in terms of just open hostility from folks like Elon Musk and the president and that sort of thing. How has that impacted your work in terms of relationships with sources and subjects and just the craft that you practice day in and day out? And also from where you sit, which I think, again, is a really unique perch at the intersection of these two worlds. Has that affected your personal life and relationships and that sort of thing as well?
I was literally signing off on a legal letter 5 minutes before I walked on stage. So it's intense, right? But it has been building steadily. So this moment doesn't actually seem like a break as much as the continuation of a lot of factors. I think when you're in this business as a journalist, you sort of expect that when you are pushing back against powerful people, in many ways you get a lot of pushback. And so it hasn't changed how we do our work in any way. It's slightly upped our legal bills and my bandwidth, my team's bandwidth on it. But I think in some ways too, it's also just very clarifying around the role and what we do. And I thought it was interesting, Alex's comments on the panel earlier about, I don't know if CEOs are running back to talk to us, Alex. I don't know if he's still here, as opposed to those YouTubers. But it is a reality that powerful people and leaders can get, distribution is no problem, and they can get their message out. And so I think we are at a moment where we have to, for ourselves and hopefully for the public too, sort of crystallize the work that we do and why it's important. But the short answer is, I think when you've been in this business for a while, you learn to tune out. You learn to listen to the criticism, but you tune out the haters. And I think it's kind of ironic, the fact that the 0.0001% of the population is out there trying to convince everyone that they're the men of the people, as opposed to the journalists who are actually doing this to reveal facts in the public's interest. And somehow, as an industry, we've allowed them to paint us as the elite ones, I think is really interesting. I haven't looked at the YouTube comments that Alex mentioned as much, because I would hope that it's cutting through. But it is a wild moment, but nothing out of the norm.
Yeah. I think that's very well said. Last question. We got to get some AI in here. What terrifies you about AI as a technology, and what really excites you?
These deals publishers are striking terrify me. And I think that is not, I could use an even stronger word, right? The idea that without understanding a business model that's really going to benefit the publishers over the long term, without having control over distribution, media companies have basically signed away their rights to protest the illegal stealing of their content that was used to train models. I think is very, very bad. It's happened. There are very, very few holdouts. Go New York Times. We don't do any of those deals either, but that really worries me. And I think the more I have learned, the more I'm worried. Like, these publications are getting paid in credits to use AI services. They're not even getting paid in cash. So I would have hoped we had learned this lesson as an industry, and I understand it's different, that you don't have to do anything. You don't even have to launch a new product. But I worry that it's also a sign that publishers are taking their eye off the ball of what they have to do to remain super relevant to their audiences in this moment, and that scares me. So many things excite me about it. I'm so interested in what tools we can build for our newsroom to, all investigative journalism, sifting through sources, satellite imagery to look at data centers, all that kind of stuff that would be so hard. I think on content creation, I have a podcast. The fact that, my Riverside software can tell me, and my host of More or Less is our podcast, what clips to do, and that is something I can literally do on the subway in between meetings when I was in New York, is really exciting. I think broader for society, all the education, healthcare, I find that very compelling as well. But I think the news industry is, again, learning the wrong lesson from it all. So,
yeah. Well, if you are not a subscriber to The Information, I highly encourage you to subscribe right now. You can do it on your phone, even. So don't hesitate. Jessica Lessin, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, JJ. Thanks, everyone.